It's Friday night, October the 6th. This is Robert Hansen. Welcome. If you are coming back and visiting us once again at the beginning of this fall season with our Facebook Live, I'd like to welcome you back. And if you're brand new, coming to us for the very first time, perhaps through a friend or referral, you just kind of stumbled across it. Whatever the case might be, thank you so very, very much for being a part of us. Tonight we're going to be dealing with what I personally describe as interruption of life, or life interrupted. And life interrupted has a very unique place, not only in family environment and the family life of people and the tragedies that are involved when life is suddenly taken away with no anticipation, no expectation. It just comes about. It seems out of nowhere, and it affects the family very, very deeply. It has dramatic effects not only on the reactions of the family, but many people also question what happens to the shift within the soul when these kind of things happen. So we're going to look into these topics tonight. Once again, I'd like to welcome you all. If you have a chance, just kind of let me know where you're coming from. It's always nice to hear where you guys come from. I always like to know if you're out of state, if you're brand new. If you can, just give us a little quick message on the Facebook page to let us know where you're coming from. But that being said, I'd like to get into the topics. We're going to cover really three significant ones this evening. The first is suicidal passing, which is the big one. Many people, it has touched in my own family indirectly, that kind of a crossing. We've also had it with some friends, family members, all of that. Alrighty? Secondly, we also have murder, which is another level of death, where someone has entered into someone's world, someone has entered into someone's space, and they have interrupted their life through an act of violence. And then finally, you have these events which seem to come out of nowhere, a gas pipe explosion, the terrible, terrible tragedies of 9/11, which of course did include, we can use the term murder, of course, because these beautiful people were murdered by the insanity of the Al-Qaeda people and all of the attachments to that. But we're really dealing with these three things: unexpected death, unplanned death. Someone leaves home, they wander outside the front door, and the next thing you know, they're not coming back. Then, of course, like I mentioned a few moments ago, suicide and murder. So I'd like to first address the suicidal one, which is the big one for many people. In the work I do, whether it be in the office, privately, in small groups, small classes that I teach, or when I'm out in the public venue, in theaters, in restaurants, in large venues, where hundreds, if not several hundred people at a time, inevitably, at some point in the night, I either am reading somebody who has had an interruption of life via suicide, or they come up to me after the evening and they will share with me that one of the readings I did was very similar to theirs, and their daughter or their son has crossed over as a result of suicide. So I'd like to really get into this and talk about how people recover from it and how people handle this and what drives it, what causes it. Now, I am not coming from a psychiatric point of view. I am not a therapist. I am not a doctor. So I just want to make sure we understand each other. If somebody is dealing with suicidal instincts, if someone has expressed suicidal commentary, I feel like killing myself, I hate my life, I hate myself, I kill myself, those kind of statements are issued in your home, amongst family. Certainly if you're working in a school where teachers are obligated to report, you must notify authorities, you must notify professional people. So let's get very clear about that before we even get into the topic. Under no conditions are we to minimize the threat of anyone saying that they're going to kill themselves. God forbid. It's a rough statement to hear, especially, for a parent to hear it from a child, a wife to hear it from a spouse. Something like this, it'll unsettle you in a split second. Now, we all use, I guess, over the period of years, Some event has happened, you know, a football team is supposed to win the Super Bowl and they didn't win the Super Bowl, and you go, I feel like killing myself. You know, it's a manner of speech, it's an expression. But when it's looked at closely, what it's simply saying is, I wish to escape these feelings, this letdown, these negative emotions by completely shutting down the thought machine. Let me just say that again. The experience that one has, right? Like I just used with the football game. Someone's supposed to be winning the Super Bowl. They lose by a field goal in the last couple of minutes. Your whole season blows up in your face, basically, and you're despondent, and your team has lost. And you say, I just feel like killing myself. I can't believe it. I lost a $100 bet, and I waited all year for this, and now suddenly it's over, and I'm just distraught. Typically, those comments dissipate very quickly. It's just a manner of speech. It doesn't raise people's hair on the back of their necks. It typically does not draw that kind of attention and focus. And typically, those kind of people that make those comments, it's just, as I said earlier, just a manner of speech. However, there are people that do have situational suicidal reactions, meaning there is an acute change in their family life in some way. Perhaps someone has died. Perhaps someone has lost a career that they've developed for 20 or 30 years. Perhaps somebody has been informed that they have an illness or an injury that cannot be remedied, and they will be remanded to a struggle and a challenge from this day forward. Various movements like that can cause interruptions of life, we call it, in which somebody looks to escape from the suffering by what is thought of perhaps as the final resolution, the last way out. They've leaped from I am depressed, I am upset, dramatically to the idea of suicide. Therapy, appropriate medications under supervised control, group counseling, working it out, doing exercise, taking a good look at self-introspection, writing out feelings. All of these things either have been tried lightly or they have been abandoned completely, and the person moves directly into this thinking. And it is something that we as a people, as a family, as an individual have to pay very, very, very close attention to. I have met tremendous amount of people in my 20 plus years of doing this work, and they said to me, my cousin committed suicide, my nephew took his life, my sister hung herself, things like this. And when I talk with them, a lot of times I'll say to them, did you have any instinct, any gut feeling? Did you have any kind of sense of it? And many of them will say no. They'll just say, well, they were a little upset, they were a little sad, they didn't seem themselves, but I never dreamt in a million years that my son would jump off in front of a train. I mean, he didn't have any indication of it. As a matter of fact, he woke up that morning and gave me a hug. He was well groomed, he was well dressed, and off he went. And the next thing I know, I'm getting a phone call and a knock on the door from the police department, and my entire universe collapses in my living room, and I've never gotten past it. And as I'm sure some of you know who have experienced this directly and personally, and please know I'm very sorry for anyone that has to suffer the death of anyone due to unexpected circumstance. It comes as a lightning bolt that jolts you. My respect and prayers are there for you. I know it is not easy. We have experienced it in my own family intimately, and to this day we still verberate from it. We still do. However, that being said, I want to kind of define for you a little bit what moves this suicidal flow. Now you have what we refer to, or I refer to anyway, as reactive suicide, and I just kind of alluded to it a little bit ago. You lose your job, your girlfriend breaks up with you, you and your wife get a divorce, you go to your bank account and you find out it's been emptied out by one of your kids, you get a pink slip left on your desk when you thought you were secure in your job, and your level of attachment, your level of self-identity, your level of safety, your level of security, your level of self-well-being has suddenly been shattered. And a movement of fear shoots through your system like a jet stream. It just blasts right through you. It changes your breath. You have a sense of panic. You raise up anxiety. You're going into this, I can't breathe, I feel sick, maybe going into the restroom and into the toilet. That whole reaction takes place. And the body is in a desperate mode. It almost feels like it's an animal in a cage, and the cage is being shaken, and you can't get out. And you say, I can't get out, I can't get out. There's no doorways, there's no roof, there's no escape. I can't find the key to the lock, and I'm suffering, and I can't get out. Get me out, get me out, get me out. It almost has a claustrophobic effect, like being boxed in a coffin, being buried alive. That's what people feel like when I speak to the families about how they felt. And I also, by the way, have met people who have attempted suicide on multiple occasions, who have somehow magically, spiritually, were able to work through it and recovered from it. And yet when you go back and talk to them, you can hear them reshare those feelings and those emotions. You see. So you have this situational suicide. And then you have this other type of suicide, which is also very pervasive, sadly. And this is where the body is overrun by a sense of depression, right? The body gets depressed to the point at which it once again cannot find relief. The idea of the bird in the cage, the idea of being trapped in a cage, is really a very, very clear analogy, a good metaphor for this kind of a feeling. And the person is sitting there at their desk, or they're just watching TV, having spaghetti and meatballs for dinner, and this overwhelming sense of fear, this overwhelming sense of anxiety comes through. Their world is fine. They have a family, they have a career, their health reports are good, everything seems in place. You know, they're paying their taxes on time and things like that, and yet they have this terrible anxiety. Some people refer to it as free floating. It just kind of shows up like a dark cloud in the sky, but yet the sky is moving through your mind, and you become suffocated in this terrible, terrible fear. In some cases, it will lift on its own. Eventually, it usually will always lift. Anxiety and those movements are caused by a conflict of some type, which may not be on the tip of your mind. It may be below the surface, and you don't want to deal with it. You're denying it, you're repressing it, you're suppressing it, you're pushing it away, you're avoiding it, whatever your mechanisms are, and you just don't want to deal with it. And that begins to grow inside of you like a rising black bubble till it gets to the point where it can explode if it does not receive proper treatment through good therapy and appropriate medication and intervention. I mention the medication only because, and I am not a physician, so please, I am not advocating medication for just casual purposes. Properly administered with the right clinician, under the right guidance, at the right time, for the right reasons, can save your life and save the life of others. If it is abused, not taken properly, not followed up, and there's not regular counseling with it, it can be very, very devastating. So I just want to make sure we're crystal about this. So there are two types of movements in the suicidal world: depression-based, reactive-based. But then there's the third one. And this is the unexpected suicide, where perhaps a young person, teenager, young adult, they're hanging out in our culture today. As all of you well know, the culture today with young people is often quite full of the movement of drugs, alcohol, the pervasive acceptance of it as a social necessity to be moved into the room of your peers, to have everybody feel that you're one of them. Many, many teenagers, many adults want to be accepted. They want to set a standard that I'm the cool guy, I'm with it, I got it, I'm like you, watch me. All of that driving them internally to try to, quote, prove themselves to others, and somehow suggest to prove themselves to themselves in some kind of altered sense of self-image. And they begin to take various drugs. It can range from roofies, it can be Valiums, it can be Xanax, it can be opiates, it can be heroin, it could be so many different things. And eventually, with the flooding of these drugs into our culture, with the flooding of these drugs into our neighborhoods, with the flooding of these drugs into our communities, it is just a matter of time, if use continues, that there will be a negative result. There just will be. And sadly, sometimes, and quite often, frankly, a lot of young people take heroin because the price of Vicodin and these other high-end opiates are so out of control. Thank goodness the government has put a lot of weight on the pharmacies and the doctors to keep it under control to some degree. But as you all know, it's still out there. It's still accessible in grandma's closet or something. And it becomes available. But if it's not, and you have an addiction to the opiate, you're going to seek relief because the body starts to get sick. And the next thing you know, you're buying a bag of heroin or 2 bags of heroin from some local heroin guy that's operating out of the trunk of his car or something by your high school. And you go home and you find out it's not just heroin, it's impure or has fentanyl in it. And you inject, and the next thing you know, you're laying on your kitchen floor dead. And your mother and father walk in and find you unconscious, dead. And it explodes their universe. And it was never the intent for the child to take the child's life. This is what we refer to as an unintended suicide. It also happens when people are fooling around with firearms. Kids take these razor-edge risks, jumping from building to building. You know, they watch it on TV and they see some of these athletic American Ninja type guys and they watch them jumping from building to building. And then someone says, how did your son pass? Well, my son died falling off a roof. What is the first instinct? He either was pushed or he jumped himself or herself. And it really wasn't the case. They were actually doing an acrobatic kind of a thing. It just went terribly bad sideways and they died. So there is a lot of movement on that suicidal plane. And what a lot of people do, and you guys know this, when someone in your family has died of suicide, the outer perimeter stares in and says, well, you know, she really was not a great mother, or he was really a troubled kid, or this and that, making all of these excuses, making all of these comments, making all of these complaints, pointing fingers, and it raises anger, it raises rage, it raises an elevated sense of frustration, all of it. And very, very rarely does a young person, consciously sit down unless there is a real psychological weapon involved in their heads that pushes them to take their life with intent. Sadly, it does happen. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. It does. Teenage suicide, living in darkness, is pervasive in this culture. It really is. But it is not driven by the family per se. They have to blame somebody for their behavior. You know, when someone commits suicide, you have to say to yourself, you know, what made them act like that? What did we do? What did we do? My husband and I are very good people. We go to church. We do this. We do that. We've given our kids everything. They want guitars. They got them. They want to go to summer camp. They did it. They told us that they didn't want to go back to school. We gave them a month off. We did all we can. Or the other side, of course, is, as parents, we're hardcore, we take no nonsense, we don't listen, they do what I tell them. If they don't do what I tell them, they're going to deal with my hand, that whole bit. And the child is constantly anxious. They feel like they're living in a prison at home. There's no love, there's no nothing, just control, punishment, discipline. That's it, that's it, that's it. And unless you're built like a U.S. Marine or somebody like that, you can cave in. And you say, how the heck am I going to get out of here? I'm only 15, 16 years old. I have no one to turn to. I'm an only child. My parents are fighting every night. My father's drinking. My mother's doing this. My dad has got a belt in his hand every time he comes through the house. I can't take it. I'm too young to run away. So they wind up one night in a veil of tears going in their bedroom and doing something terrible. And the next thing you know, you open up the door and there they are. You see. So suicide is not as simple as it appears. It's a very, very powerful movement. And when I deal with parents, especially parents, I'm not eliminating the older guys here. I mean, I know adults in their 50s and 60s that take their own life. I do. You know, brothers and sisters and husbands and wives and grandparents and so on. I've met children whose parents have committed suicide, right? And when we typically think about the suicide, we think about suicide in the moment, right? Well, my dad sat down, he took a gun, he put it in his mouth, and he shot himself, and he killed himself. Right? That's what would be like a kind of a standard suicide scenario. Something went from A to B, from A to Z, I should say, and it was over. However, there are people that, quote, drink themselves to death. They know they have diabetes. They know they should be taking insulin. They know they should be following a certain health protocol, and they intentionally refuse. They intentionally refuse. I'm not taking heroin. I'm having the candy bars. Leave me alone. I don't care if I have sores. Life stinks. I don't care. And what they really are doing is they're committing suicide in a very slow way, because they've come to a place internally, the image they thought they should have, the idea of the life they should be living, has been shattered. They have been following a dream, chasing down a dream, as it were, right? Chasing down a dream, like the, God rest his soul, the late Tom Petty, chasing down a dream. And the next thing you know, your dream turns into a nightmare. You don't see any other options, but you're still in the physical body. You don't want to put a gun in your mouth, so what do? You slowly go about it by abusing yourself one day at a time, slowly, 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 and despite the cryings of your wife, the pleading of your children, you continue to do so. Or you take very, very high risks. You take very drunk driving, all of the craziness that goes with it. And as you guys also know, I'm sure you've heard of it, there are people that want to have suicide by police. They come out, a police officer brandishing a knife. They buy a BB gun that looks exactly like a 45, and they point it at a law officer. What choice does that man have? He doesn't know it's a fake gun. And you're a 19-year-old guy whose eyes are spinning because he's on methamphetamines or something. You're going to get yourself shot. And you should get shot if you come at a police officer like that. He's got a family and wife and children. He's not going to sit there and say, let me see what kind of gun it is. He can't do that. He's got about 2 seconds to figure this whole thing out. You know? And just a side comment here. The men that I know, that I've been around in over the 40 years of being around law enforcement guys, there is not one police officer that I know, not one, that has shot somebody that was ever happy about it. They all get very upset. A lot of them take counseling. Some even leave the job. They just can't handle killing another human being. So this idea that these cops love killing people is just outrageous and unbelievable. Does it happen? Yes, it does, and it's a tragic thing, and we're not here tonight to discuss that, but I just want to qualify that a little bit. Very, very, very few law enforcement guys take any pleasure or any pride in wounding or hurting another human being, especially killing them. It just is not part of the law enforcement culture at all, at all. But getting back, so you have these different methods of suicide, and someone will come up with a knife or attack a law officer, something like that, and the next thing you know, they're shot. And they're killed. And they find out later that they left a note on their kitchen counter that they can't stand their lives, and they call the cops to the house to start an argument. The cops show up thinking it's a domestic thing, which it kind of is, and they go out in the street with a butcher knife going after the policeman, and he shoots them. And they take out their own life. They can't do it to themselves, so they want someone by proxy to do it for them. And what better person to do it than someone that's got a weapon on them by requirement, by part of their job, right? However, please listen to this piece. You know, when I talk to parents and when I do public lectures on this, I ask people all the time, what is the most powerful instinct in any animal? Any animal, a dog, a cat, a wolf, a bird, a rabbit, I don't care what it is. The most powerful instinct in all creatures, including the human animal, is the instinct to survive. That is our primary instinct. And if you don't believe it, hold your nose closed for 2 minutes, if you can do that, even for a minute. Have someone put your head underwater. And while you're having your head underwater, dreams of all your money, your family, your wife, your kids, your Corvette, your motorcycle, your vacations to Hawaii go right out the window. And all you want to do is get your head up and catch some air, because your anatomy, your driven biology says live, 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 live. It is the most powerful movement we have, bar none. bar none. Therefore, when somebody falls under the dark spell of mind, when the movement of thinking is so powerful, so pervasive, and has been wounded over a period of time, chipped away at, broken down, if the person has been under subtle bullyism, major bullyism, which is a nightmare not only on social media, but in schools all over. We've all seen these stories about public bullying. And you could have the boss bullying the wife, intimidating the female at work. You could have the big jock kind of a guy intimidating Casper Milquetoast kind of a kid and making him sad. You could have the, quote, the pretty girls teasing the not such a pretty girl. All of those kind of scenarios. And depending upon self-image and processing, that child, especially when they're young, begins to have a negative connotation of self. And they begin to say in very subtle ways, what's the purpose of my life? I'm not loved. I'm not wanted. I'm always failing. I don't look good. I am not pretty. I am not accepted. I am not wanted. Right? And you give that to someone over a period of time, it begins to take a major, major effect. And it really starts to saturate their very soul. And, you know, if you kind of catch it at some point, you can get positive information. You get into a different social environment. You perhaps join a church group, or you join your shul, or you join the B'nai B'rith, or you join a yoga community where there's more of a loving, open feeling. You find yourself perhaps in an art class where everybody's very open to you, and you don't have to hang out with guys that are all just stud gym guys and they laugh at you because you only have little muscles, all that kind of stuff. You know the deal, right? So there's always other options, but a lot of people either don't see them, they don't have access to them, or the people they want to hang out with. They want to hang out with the pretty girls. They want to hang out with the big guys. They want to hang out with the popular kids. They want to hang out with the guys with the motorcycles. And they're getting pushed away. No, you're not one of us. You're not cool. You don't look good. You don't have the part. And then what they try to do is to win their attention, win their affection. They act out. And when that doesn't work, where do they turn? Where do they go? Their mothers and fathers maybe are working 2 jobs. They're saying, yeah, you'll grow up, you'll get over it, don't worry. I went through it too when I was a kid. Oh, no, you didn't. You may have gone through something similar, but you're not going through what they're going through, because each human being has their own unique emotional makeup and reactions to those emotions. It depends upon your genetics. It depends on your conditioning, on your religious, social, spiritual upbringings. It depends on how much understanding and compassion you've had in your life from your primary, what we call your nuclear family, people that love you close by. All of this is a factor. It's not just like this. So when you put all of this together, at some point in time, if there is enough thorns, if it is negative enough, if it's painful enough, if it's hurtful enough, and built internally, you do not have the mechanism to counterbalance it, right? The dark side eventually, so to speak, can win. And then internally, this person, whether it be a young person, a teenager type, or older, suddenly goes empty inside, and their defenses break down. And what is so powerful about this is that those defenses that are normally in place to keep us solid, to keep us healthy of mind and body, to keep us on the path, as it were, suddenly fall apart. And the instinct to survive, the strongest instinct in the human being, is suddenly turned off. That is how powerful the movement of depression and suicidal reflex can affect somebody. And I am telling you as a friend, never think ever that it can't happen to you. We all are vulnerable to this. All of us. In the same way, we are all vulnerable to a car crash. We are all vulnerable to taking a fall in the street. We are all vulnerable. Oh, I would never do that. I would never do that. Perhaps using your references from what has occurred in the past, No, you're here. We're talking, obviously. But don't suggest ever that it will never or could never happen. You have no idea what can trick or move the human emotion and the human mind. So for those of you out there that have experienced it directly through a loved one, especially for the mothers and the fathers, the siblings, the grandparents, and these grandparents who are very close to families, sometimes they're kind of put to the outside, right? They're kind of on the edge. Oh, grandma's okay, we'll tell her. They kind of be dismissive. Let me tell you something. I'm a grandparent. My wife and I are grandparents, and our granddaughter means the world to us. And as she goes, we go. And I'm sure a lot of you can identify with this. And we get wounded just like anybody else. My granddaughter gets a cold. I'm calling my daughter 3 times a day. It's just the way I am. She's only a little baby, 2 years old. I want to know what's going on, right? So if you could imagine what it's like to be a grandparent and you find out that your granddaughter is in a coma because she just hung herself and she's not quite dead yet, it could be devastating. I mean, over the top devastating, right? So there are signs and there are signals, right? They don't keep good hygiene. They don't address themselves well. They're not showing up for work. Their clothes are unkempt. They seem to be out of their norm. They're agitated. They become silent. They go in the room and close their door. Maybe the music is on super loud or not on at all. They disappear. They don't keep contact with friends and family. They may write dark letters. They may draw pictures. All these little indicators, which is a reflex of a processing of what they are feeling. They're trying to say, I am in trouble, I am in trouble, but they can't get it out because sometimes they themselves don't know what's leading to suicide. They just know that they're feeling sick to their stomach, they don't feel good, they feel disconnected, and they have no idea that tomorrow morning it's going to take them over completely and they're going to walk in front of an oncoming truck. And it catches everybody off guard. If you have someone that is dealing with these kind of issues, I'm pleading with you to get intervention tonight. You don't want to wait. You don't want to sit and we'll see what happens. If you genuinely feel someone you love has true suicidal energy, has really expressed some of these dark characteristics, you have to take action. Why? Because the person dealing with this, who's got the suicidal reactions, is powerless. They're powerless. It's like their mind, not their brain, their mind has taken on a terminal cancer of thinking. That's exactly what it is. Their mind, not their brain, not the tissue of the brain. The mind itself has taken on a cancer. It's like a big black wound that has entered into the brain, and it can't be alleviated unless it is caught early, and that then requires treatment and so on to help get past this and learn to cope. You hear that word, coping mechanisms, correct? And if you've been raised in a time period, if you've been brought up in a certain family environment, if you've been brought up in a certain social environment where your coping skills are very limited, very minimal, you have very, very bad defense mechanisms internally to protect yourself from the harms of the world, you're very ripe to commit suicide. For the parents out there especially, I was just addressing this, comes with the suicide is not only the loss of the child, which is devastating. I mean, it is devastating. If you follow me here on Facebook, which many of you have done over the years, I have always written about parents that have lost children and so on, and I often conclude my commentary by saying, I have never witnessed a greater sorrow. And you know what? I never have. I have never met a greater sorrow ever than a parent who has lost a child, especially the mother who has birthed that child. It doesn't get any more painful than that, except in one other situation. And that is we're leading up to it, where another person has entered your child's world and has killed your child, which is the murder of a child. And we're going to address that in a minute. So for those of you that are dealing with the suicide as a parent, as a loved one, as a brother, as a sibling, as a sister, as a close friend, someone that's got compassion, the forgiveness level is extremely, extremely important, because I hope you understand now It was not in their doing. They could not control it. I am not referring to those who are playing with drugs and something goes wrong. There's movement there and there's room there to say, you knew better, you shouldn't have done it, you're experimenting, you're playing with fire, and now it exploded and we have to bear the consequences. I absolutely understand and I do respect the anger attached to that. And to make believe you shouldn't be angry is worse. I'd rather have you say openly, I'm angry, I'm disappointed, I am heartbroken, I am crushed. My daughter, my son, we did all we could, we begged, we pleaded, and it wouldn't go away. And they went out and they hung out with these guys and they hung out with these girls and they refused to listen and they kept pushing the envelope, and now my daughter is dead. It is an absolute nightmare, and you could certainly understand why a parent would have what we would call justifiable anger. However, if you go underneath deeper into that child, we have to look at what drove this child internally to permit themselves to be exposed over a long period of time to the damaging behavior with those other people and to themselves. They perhaps weren't thinking that suicide would be the result, that life would be terminated. They just felt they would get high, disappear from the worries of the world. I don't have to deal with my math exam. I don't have to go to work. I don't got to listen to my mother screaming at me anymore. Let me get high. Let me go to my friend's house, stick a needle in my arm on the couch, pop a few pills, and the world will go away, and I will fall into wonderland for a few hours or a day or two, and I'll resurrect, and I'll start again. And if I run into that problem again, I know what I can do. I can get relief just with a push. And that's what most of them do. That's what most of them do. But as I said earlier, in time, it's going to catch up, and then there's going to be a tragedy. And it's irreversible. It is irreversible. You see. So all of these symptoms, all of these signs are glaring. When I was a teenager, when I was running around as a guy in my 20s, I was out in the bars, I was out partying, and I was having a great time. I was out with my friends. I dabbled in and out with things. I did. All my friends did. It was just part of my world. But I was also an athlete, and I was working full-time and all of that. So I couldn't kind of like commit myself to it completely, and I wasn't drawn into it that deeply. But I absolutely understand it, because I watched it. A lot of my friends, and sadly, a lot of my very close friends who I grew up with are dead. And they committed suicide, not with gun in the mouth or hanging in the bathroom, but they did it with the drugs and the alcohol over time. I even had a friend of mine, God rest his soul, years ago, he was told by the doctors, if you take another drop of alcohol, your liver's going to blow up. If you don't do it, you have a good chance of recovery. Your liver is cirrhotic, but it has a piece of your liver is healthy, and you can hang in and have a good life, and you got children, you got a wife, and you got a job. So just go to AA and get yourself squared away, and you'll recover your life back. You know what he wrote? This guy wrote a note. He paid all his bills, left a note to his family, and said, I'd rather drink. And within a month, he was dead. He intentionally killed himself because he'd rather drink than have a life. And the result was he left his kids completely devastated, his wife completely devastated. Some people say that is selfish. On the surface, it certainly looks that way. It surely does. But you can't just look at the surface of anything. Thus, you can't judge a book by its cover. There was something moving in him much deeper than that. Much deeper. And he found a comfortable, convenient way to do it. And his attitude basically was, when I die, I die. I just keep drinking. I'm loving it. If I die today, I'll die. If I die 6 months, I die. Right? That was his attitude. And many people have that attitude. Let me just shoot up. Whatever happens now happens. And they kind of have that casualistic, also causalistic effect. And it's also catastrophic. So when we're dealing with suicide, take a good look. Many of you, I know, and I've met so many parents, they blame themselves that they missed it. They blame others for causing it. People seek blame and anger for a reason. People blame and have anger for a reason. When you are angry at death, when you are blaming death, it is a method to avoid grieving. It takes you off the hook of grief. It gives you a fictitious enemy to fight. The drug dealers, it's the drug dealers that did it to my son. Yes, on a certain level, that's true. Yes. If someone is killed in a car crash, do I say, well, it's the dealership that sold my son the car? Of course not. Right? You buy the vehicle, your son goes out, he drinks 4 bottles of Budweiser, and the next thing you know, he's crashing into a wall. Is that the dealership's fault? Of course not. Of course not. Right? It's his behavior that drove him in that direction. Understandably, when you're dealing with a heroin dealer, it's completely illegal and they belong in prison, and there's no doubt about it. I feel like choking them all by the throat. That's the truth of it. But also the other reality is they don't knock on your front door and say, by the way, I'm selling heroin this morning. How much would you like? No, I'll go to the next house and try again. You have to seek them out, or you have to be encouraged to seek them out. And someone is willingly to do that because they want to be accepted. They want to be a part. They can't stand themselves the way they're built. They go and seek it. Let's call it what it is. And it's painful as hell to feel that somehow in your mind that your child, your son has failed, or you have failed them, or that you've turned your back on them because you can't deal with it anymore. And you've had 7 runs in a rehab, you're completely broke, the money's been stolen, pictures are off the wall, your car has been crashed up 3 times, and you're up to here with it. And you can't do it anymore. And then tragedy comes. Right? It's a little more complex than most people think. Suicide is another form of crossing over. Suicide is the result of fear, of anxiety, of reactive or chemical depression. It is overwhelmingly powerful. We are not dragon slayers with suicide. It is extremely powerful. Therefore, on a spiritual level, on the other side, we call it, in the world of souls, if you like this language, they are received completely. It is suggested in certain cultures, in certain faith systems, in certain religions, should you commit suicide, you would cast to hell. They are so full of crap. It is not even, it just makes me infuriated. It just makes me infuriated. And this is not religion, folks. You know how I feel about that. I happen to come out of a Christian culture, but this is never about religion here, so please don't do religion on me, all right? But the man on the cross, very famous fellow in our spiritual world, right, in the Judeo-Christian culture, the Christ, Jesus, often showed going after the lost sheep, right? The ones he had under his control and his possession, who he loved, yes, loved them completely. He wasn't worried about those guys. His heart, his essence, was seeking the lost ones, the lepers, the mental lepers of this world, those caught in alcoholism, drug addiction, self-abuse, self-humiliation, self-hate, self-loathing, people who see themselves as broken, weakened, destroyed, incapable, unavailable, despite all the family telling them how wonderful they are. Right? Yeah, you're wonderful, I love you, kiss, kiss, hug, hug. But the child or the young adult doesn't see it. They don't see it, especially from the parent figure. Right? You know that. They kind of reject, I don't listen to my parents. I listen to my teenage friends who were the same age, basically walking around with the same line of thinking. Right? There's an old expression, right? You've heard it, birds of a feather flock together. And that is true. They seek each other out. And who runs that little show are the heroin dealers and the drug guys who add to that whole fuel. Add to that whole fuel, right? So when you have this beautiful spiritual person, we'll leave it at that for tonight, as the Christ, he goes out and he says, I want those who are suffering from the dark places of the world, who do not understand their sacredness, who do not understand how deeply loved they are. I will come and show you how deeply loved you are. I will bring my grace to you and I will help you. That is who I am looking for. Therefore, you are the first, and the lowest will be raised and the highest will be lowered. It is a spiritual teaching that echoes through the heavens. That is how beautiful it is, And that is how true it is. So if you have anyone in your family that has had their life interrupted by suicide, as a friend, as a medium, doing this for 20 plus years, I am telling you, they are in good hands. They are in good hands. They are in good hands. Their soul, their confusion is almost washed clean, and they begin to illuminate beautifully. And they come to a place where all addiction and all fear subside. And that's not a fairy tale. That is not some made-up story. I've seen it in my readings for years. For years. It also includes the parents who are beating themselves up with guilt, who are always opening the window, hoping that the imagination of this nightmare will go away and that magically their daughter's going to walk through the front door again. And of course that won't happen in the physical way. And they're hoping that this is all a bad dream and they just can't get out of this nightmare. So how does one handle the guilt? How does one handle the terrible, terrible dread that comes from a suicidal passing? What do we do with it? What do we do about it? How do we handle it? It's horrible, right? And we handle that first by fully accepting what has happened. No games, no denial. You accept fully that you are crushed, that your heart is broken, that you can't move, you can't breathe, you can't eat, you can't sleep. Why? Because that is true, right? You support yourself with others that have had a similar experience. I know people tell me it's like a big crying circle. They all sit around and weep and cry. Good. Connect yourself to those who understand what you're going through. You attach to other men and women who help you support each other. It is done in all yoga communities, all Zen communities. It is done in religious communities where it's called the Sangha, the gathering of the same for the purpose of flourishing in God's light, if you like that lingo. And they recognize the strength of numbers. We have been given to each other to help us through these terrible situations. It is also very, very helpful to do memorials. It is helpful to light candles. It is helpful to pray. It is helpful to have a walkathon. It is helpful to write a book. All of these movements, whatever they may form as, golf tournaments, fishing charter boat tournaments, whatever it is, are all terrific because it acts as what we call a catharsis. It helps to express it, to talk about it. In psychology, it's often called you are discharging your suffering rather than bottling it up, sitting alone, drinking alcohol, taking Valiums, going to sleep, pulling the blankets over your head, kicking the dog, slapping the kids, going out and causing harm and falling off a bar stool plank, or go out on a spending spree to avoid life. That is no way to cope with any kind of suicidal death or any death at all for that matter. The way to heal your grief begins with honesty and acceptance. That is the answer to handling suicidal passing and the death of any loved one. The next phase off of this is when someone has entered your world, an outsider or an insider. Most murders, interruption of life, are done by someone who knows the victim. They are usually driven by sex, romantic relationships gone bad, over money, gambling debts, business deals gone sour, lying in business deals, something like this, narcotic trafficking and sales where murder is on the table, right? In certain cultures, wise guy cultures, you kind of are in it and you know that murder, getting whacked as they say, is part of it. Sure, sure. If you're in law enforcement, military service, quote, you can be murdered by the bad guy. That is part of the risk factor that you take, taking the shield and wearing it with honor and going out there, right? Or saluting our great American flag and serving our great nation. And you take the harm and the risk of being killed. And that is what a warrior does. And that's why I admire them so completely. so completely. They volunteer to do this for our safety and our benefit. They are incredible. Incredible. Therefore, when someone enters your world, though, not through military, not through law enforcement, not through those things, if your son is a drug dealer and he gets killed by the drug dealer, it's kind of a lot more rationalized. But if your son is just sitting in a parked car and there's a mistaken identity and someone taps on his window and puts a 45 round into the side of his head and kills your child, it is unbearable that an outside stranger would do this, right? And you see the person that does it, right? See the person that does it as an animal, as some kind of a beast. And they are. They are. The average matured human mind does not destroy life. It preserves life, protects life, insulates life, because they itself are life, and they sense life within the other, and there is a deep reverence for life. But when the mind is twisted, when the mind is dark, when the mind is greedy, when the mind is selfish, when it gets pleasure and satisfaction and feels whole and complete through the wounding of another, especially the ultimate wounding, which is murder, which is justified because he looked at my girlfriend, or he took $10 from my wallet, or he stole my bike, and that justifies the ultimate act of revenge and anger. And if there is nothing to persuade it, to inhibit that behavior, they will act on it. Many times people who sit on the edge of that violence take a few drinks, the inhibitions go down, and they are completely able to what we call facilitate action, and they do things under the influence of drugs and alcohol they perhaps normally wouldn't do, and sadly it results in a murder. I had a reading 6-8 months ago, and this fella got mad at his wife, and he ran her over with his car. I had the family, and he's in jail, but he killed her. And they were just having an argument about something innocuous, some crazy thing in the car, and she got out of the car to say, "The hell with you, I'm leaving, I'm going home." And he goes, "Really?" Whoop! And he ran right over her, trying to suggest it was just an accident. And, you know, the law enforcement guys are no dopes, and they figured it out right away that this guy intentionally did it because there was a speeding up of the tires, and boom, they figured it out. And now he's in jail probably for the next 20 years. Ruined his life, ruined his wife's life, destroyed his children. Right? All because of the impulse, lack of impulse control. Right? And that impulse control is completely taken away just about almost entirely when you're under the influence. You have no defense. You have no defense. So when someone murders somebody, it is most of the time on a personal level. And they see it as the ultimate punishment, the ultimate harm, and it usually occurs that way. But for the parent especially, or for the wife, or the spouse, or the brother, or the sister, it is a major violation. But what I want you to see, it's just one animal seeing another animal. I'm not telling you that your child is an animal, but I'm an animal. I'm a mammal. I'm a two-legged animal. I'm a beast. I am. I may be socialized, but that's what we are. It's a million years of evolution inside of everybody in the animal world. Please, we're not floating around with butterfly wings. We're animals, and we respond as animals. Our biology reacts as animals, and certain animals attack other animals because that is all they understand and that is all they know. They have been conditioned around violence. There are the rare people that are completely healthy, good people, and they snap, right? This horrible, 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 horrible tragedy in Las Vegas, right? This guy does all of this machine gun shooting and kills all these people and wounds all these people, and it's the worst shooting mass shooting in American history. They can't figure out one motive for this guy. Maybe they have it today, I don't know, but as far as I know, they don't even know why the hell he did it. His own brother doesn't know why he did it. People don't even know why he did it. And this guy had 10 guns in the room or something. He was gone. He was ready to go. No indication. Piece of that beast woke up inside this average guy who apparently was worth millions of dollars. Life seemed to be great to this guy. And he decides to go out and kill 50 people, 60 people. Just slaughter them. For what agenda internally? What satisfaction was this guy getting? The beast mode was alive and well in this man, and something triggered it. And what is in that guy is in you and is in me. And it's just a matter of what buttons to push and how much pressure can be applied. And if someone happens to wander into it, you may want to call it an accident. My son happened to be at the wrong place at the wrong time. My daughter dated the wrong guy for the wrong reasons, that kind of a thing, and it can work out. But if you step back and look at it, you will really see it's just two, please accept the language, two animals engaging each other, and one goes bad. And then thirdly, you have these terrible situations like 9/11, but others, let's call it just the accidental car accident where someone's a pedestrian and someone's trying to get away from the cops, let's say, a high-speed chase, and they plow the person down. It seems like almost every night on the news, I'm hearing about somebody who was hit by a driver and the driver takes off. It's almost every night now. It used to be like a rare event years ago. People would have the integrity to stop and help the person they hit. It seems like almost every other night someone's blowing through a stop sign, killing somebody, leaving them in the street to die like a dog. Bad language there, of course. I'm sorry about the dog reference, but you understand my point. And they leave them there, and they could care less. They just like a sack of laundry, and they just roll on, and they would go to sleep, and I got away with this one, and it didn't mean anything to me. It's unbelievable where the human mind is being taken sometimes, and it's not in just this day and age. This has been going back since the caveman. There's always been movements of death to innocent people as a result of the behavior of others, right? Whether it be with intent or by accidental incident. In either case, it can be crippling, and it can take a family and destroy it if it's allowed to. But when you see it as the movement of the human condition, when you see it as the movement of life itself, when you don't make it as personal. Look, I understand. Believe me, I got 4 kids. I love my wife. I love my children. I'm very blessed. They're all with me to this point in time, right? My biological children, right? I would be lying to you 1,000% if I said I would be just, it's okay, life is life. Well, of course not. My human being piece, my humanity, my being a dad, a brother, a husband, a father, of course is affected. I understand it. My brain has been conditioned to react this way, and I can see my mind doing it. And I will grieve and I will cry, which is the normal human response, right? But as awakening starts to take place, there's also a piece within me and within you too, that you see it in the kind of a bigger picture. And you say, we all are going to pass at one time. We are all going to move at one time. But our brains tell us it's supposed to happen the way we want. And we're all supposed to be 95, drinking champagne, laying in Hawaii with our feet up in the air, and then we go to heaven. That's what people want, right? My younger brother passed away. His son passed away. People move in my life, my very dear friends. We all know people that no one thought on a given day that death would arrive. And it did. And that is part of the spiritual process. They are, quote, called home. And we want to believe for most people that they're called to a good place and a place of peace, eternal rest. Many people will write on Facebook, they are finally in a better place. Well, if they're in a better place and they are at peace and they're in glory and they're in the fields of forever, what's the problem? Yes, you missed them physically, you missed the hugs and the kisses, I understand all. But when that was happening, they were dealing with bone cancer, they were dealing with suicide, they were dealing with drug addiction, the cops were at your house, everything was terrible. So perhaps on the limits of the physical world, their soul said, I've got to get out. And oddly enough, the soul, if it has to get out, it will place itself in a position to free the body from the suffering. That's what most people do not understand. They don't get that piece. That the soul will position itself to free the body. It is because we believe we own the other people, control the other people. I'm the dad, I own my kids. If my kids leave, I'm going to be upset. That kind of a thing. It alters how you see it. It just does. So to put all of these three things together for you now, when life is interrupted, and it's interrupted, listen, you guys know this. I mean, life is interrupted by cancer, life is interrupted by heart attacks, life is interrupted by cystic fibrosis, life is interrupted by leukemia. I mean, life gets interrupted every day, all the time, every minute. Every night, tonight, all across this great country and around the world, people are dying and people are being born. It is the movement of all things, and that is the beauty of it. And we are in that flow. It is only the brain that says we shouldn't be in that flow. So I just want you guys to understand this basic topic tonight. Acceptance, allow the grief to be. Please stop blaming. Please stop finger pointing. Please look deeply at what drove these beautiful young people, these adults, to interrupt their world. It is an event beyond their capacity to stop it. It is the great flood of the mind that no one could prevent. It's like the hurricane that went through Puerto Rico. You can't stop it. Okay? I just want to make a few final closing comments. I want to thank you all for being here. I have a few announcements to make. We have some interesting things I want to share with you. So I'd just like to take a moment and just read them off to you. So bear with me. I'm putting my glasses on here for a sec. We have available a program that I run. It's called the Circle of Spirits. It's where I meet with 6 people in a private setting at my office. For those of you that would like to meet with me privately, it's a group of 6. Everyone gets read. They bring questions about personal topics. I do readings on the other side for everybody. I do not leave until everyone gets read. We have 2 seats available for the evening of October 18th. 2 seats. 4 people have taken it. There's 2 remaining. So if you're interested, 2 seats left, October 18th. Love to see you. I, like many of you, are big animal lovers. I, like many of you, have lost my pets. My Luke died a few years back. I still think about him. We have urns up in our house. We are a big, loving, pet-loving family. I love animals. I love nature. I love domestic pets. My Danny boy is my son. He is my friend. He is my companion. And one day, by God's grace, when he gets called home, I'm going to hurt, for sure. So we have Circle of Pets. We call it Circle of Pets. That is on November 1st. And yes, your pets do come through the family members that come through. What is important to understand, you don't have to put 6 people together. You can come by yourself. You can come with 2. All we ask you to do is just, if you decide you'd like to come, you go to robertehansen.com and you can register. You can even form your own group. Let us know you've got 6 on your own, and we'll figure out something for you. Now, this one is sensitive, so I just want to talk about it, okay? Most of my work, and a lot of my work, comes where parents have buried their children. Their grief is over the top. This is the first time in my career that I am offering a Circle of Spirits for those parents that have lost a child or children. I'm only taking 6 people. It could be one group of 6 from one family or a single dad. It doesn't matter. It is on November 6th. On November 6th. We only have 4 seats left. That's it. So if you decide you would like to meet with me privately, with other parents who are enduring the same suffering as you, it is a very healing environment. I will talk with you. I will read all of you. We will share our stories. It is enormously helpful in the healing process. Just give it some thought. November 6th, we have only 4 spots left. All of these, by the way, can be done on Zoom. Zoom is what we have here at the office, where if you're not able to come see me in Merrick, where I live, where my hometown is, you can arrange it and we will do it just like this, and it's face-to-face, me and you face-to-face, online. 6 people, Circle of Spirits, I read everybody, and we will do it that way. It's on FaceTime, and we look at each other, or the Zoom has like a private computer thing to it, and it will be a one-on-one kind of a reading session. But you can line up with me with that. So you've got options. You can come to the office, where I am, or if you can't get to me, if you're living out of state, for example, you just say, I want to be part of the Zoom reading. I'm a parent that's lost a daughter or a son. I really want to be helped. I need to speak with Robert. This is the way to do it, guys. Okay, so in person with me is on November 6th. We also have other options as far as the Zoom reading go. Finally, last comment, I'll let you guys scoot out of here. The next Facebook will be on October 22nd. The name of that Facebook Live with me, October 22nd, is called Shelter from the Storm. Simply put, life comes at all of us in a lot of ways. Most people I meet are constantly edgy, unsettled, fearful, worried, with small pockets of happiness, occasionally some sense of peace, But most people I meet are pretty much on the edge. They seem to be laboring through life, pushing through life. Life is difficult. It's painful. I don't want to get up in the morning. I can't sleep at night. I'm up all night. I'm always tossing and turning. I'm always worrying. That kind of a thing. We're going to look at that intimately. And if you give me a chance, I can help you shift from uneasiness to rest, from discontent to a real sense of serenity by just following a couple of basic concepts and ideas. It's born out of my background in the martial arts. It is born out of my background in my Zen practice over the last 45 years. It is part of my world. It is something I share on a spiritual level, and it is something I think that will be wonderful for you guys, and it will be interactive. So that is on Friday night, October 22nd, 7:30, Shelter from the Storm. If your heart is hurting, if your world is hurting, if you have anxiety, if you have fear, if you have doubts, if you're all alone, you don't know what to do, dealing with sickness, dealing with terminal sickness, right? All of it. This is the night coming up for you. It'll bring a completely different sense of peace to you. All right? So I want to thank all of you guys tonight for being here. Whoever came tonight, I'm very grateful to have all of you. It's been a privilege and a pleasure to work with you guys. I look forward to seeing you in the future. I want to wish you the very best. This Monday is Columbus Day in honor of the great Italian American people. It is part of our American culture. Every statue stay standing. Let's keep this country going. God bless America. Have a good night.